Welcome to today's class on asylum. So extradition and asylum are next to next, and understanding asylum you should know about the status of refugees, stateless person and internally displaced person. So today we will see asylum. The word asylum is from the Latin word and it was derived from the Greek word asylia, which means inviolable place. The term is referred to those cases where the territorial state declines to surrender a person to the requesting state and provide shelter and protection in its own territory. According to Stock, the conception of asylum under international law involves two elements. First one, shelter, which is more than merely temporary refugee. Second, a degree of active protection on the part of the authorities in control of the territory of asylum. The Institute of International Law, in its session in September 1950, defined the term asylum. Asylum is the protection which a state grants on its territory or in some other place under the control of certain of its organs to a person whom comes to seek for it. The term asylum is used to describe a number of legal notions. First, to grant by the state of admission into their territory of refugees, the protection of refugees against return to their country in respect of which they fear persecution. So this word persecution, where the cause of death is so nearby and they feel the threat in their place where they dwell, and non-extradition of political offenders. The above elements of asylum will show that extradition is an antithesis of territorial asylum. When asylum stops, where extradition begins. So this is the quote which is famously said. According to Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by General Assembly of the United Nations on the 10th December 1948, it says that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other country asylum from persecution. This right may not be invoked in the case of prosecution genuinely arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purpose and principles of United Nations. A state has a right to grant asylum to a person on the principle that it has a sovereign right to control over the individuals found on its territory. The right of territorial asylum has been conferred to the state on the basis of its sovereignty over the territory. The right is exclusively in the sense that other states are excluded to exercise the jurisdiction over the same territory. The draft Convention on Territorial Asylum, adopted by the General Assembly in the year 1974, has recognized under Article 1 that the grant of asylum is a sovereign right of the state. The territorial jurisdiction, the right extends by application to embassies, legations, vessels and aircrafts. A state grants asylum to a person because of many reasons. The first one, it is granted to save a person from jurisdiction of local authorities on the ground that he will not get fair trial. Second, a person may be granted asylum on the humanitarian ground in order to protect political offenders against the violent and disorderly action of irresponsible section of population. Third, the national security also plays an important role in granting asylum. The offenders who may be a rebel today may become a ruler in the future date. The last one, although a state may grant asylum after taking into consideration of any of the above factors, state adopt a cautious approach before doing so because it normally affects the friendly relation of the two states. Example, when India granted asylum to Dalai Lama and other Tibetan, it resulted in a more strained relationship between India and China, which is continuing even today. In this case, Dalai Lama and his followers were granted asylum on the ground of territorial sovereignty by India. The next important question that arises is asylum a right of a person? It is said that a person has a right to get asylum in other states. Universal Declaration of Human Rights under Article 14, which says that everyone has a right to seek and enjoy in other country asylum from persecution. General Assembly of the United Nations unanimously adopted a resolution in 1967 where a declaration of territorial asylum which provides that no one shall be subjected to measures such as rejection at the frontier, expulsion or compulsory return to any state where he may be subject to prosecution, but it does not mean that Article 14 provides the right to seek and enjoy asylum. A person can seek and enjoy asylum only when it is granted by the receiving state. The state has no such duty to grant asylum to a person. The right to grant asylum vests only in the receiving state. It is exercised on the basis of principle of territorial sovereignty. Next, if you see, the two types of asylum is territorial asylum and extraterritorial asylum. There is one more component called neutral in the diplomatic asylum. We will see that later. Territorial asylum is granted by a state on its territory. The right to grant asylum by a state to a person on its own territory flows from the fact that every state exercises territorial sovereignty over all persons on its territory to anyone. The grant of territorial asylum depends upon the discretion of the state, which is not under the legal obligation to grant asylum to a fugitive. As no precise rule as to grant of territorial asylum is there as of now. General Assembly called upon the International Law Commission in 1959 to undertake the codification of principles and rules of international law relating to right of asylum. On 14th December 1967, General Assembly adopted Declaration of Territorial Asylum through the adoption of resolution. The declaration consists of a preamble and 4 articles dealing with the principle relating to the grant and the refusal of asylum. This declaration provides that the right to seek asylum and enjoy asylum may not be invoked by a person with respect to whom there are serious reasons for considering that he has committed a crime against peace, a war crime or a crime against humanity. If you see Article 4 in that, the declaration provides that the state granting asylum shall not permit the person who have received asylum to engage in any activities contrary to the purpose and the principle of United Nations. From the above provisions of the declaration, it is very clear that the state does not have absolute right to grant asylum. The grant of asylum is a part of which cannot be exercised in respect of international crimes including genocide. Now we will see the famous examples of territorial asylum. First is Idi Amin has been granted asylum by Saudi Arabia. Baby Doc has been given asylum by France. Dawood Ibrahim, a mafia don, was given asylum by Dubai government. Salman Rushdie, he is a controversial novel writer. In his Satanic Verses novel, was given asylum by Great Britain. Taslima Nasreen, a Bangladeshi writer, for her novel was granted asylum by the Swedish government. Tiger Mano was granted, who was involved in the Bombay bomb blast case, was given asylum by Pakistan. Dalai Lama and his followers was granted asylum by the Indian government. So these are few famous incidents which took place as regards to asylum. Now we will see extraterritorial asylum. Active protection is given outside the territory not belonging to the state granting it. When asylum is granted by the state at places outside its own territory, it is called extraterritorial asylum. It usually describes those cases in which a state refuses to surrender a person demanding who is not upon its own physical territory, but it is upon one of its public ships lying in the foreign territorial borders or upon a diplomatic premises within the foreign territory. Asylum is given at legation, consular premises, warships, or instances of extraterritorial asylum. Now we will see diplomatic asylum or asylum in legation. Since granting extraterritorial asylum involves derogation from the sovereignty of the state, international law ordinarily does not recognize the right to grant asylum in the premises of legation. But asylum may be granted in legation premises following exceptional cases. First one, individual who are physically in danger from violence. Second, where there is well established and binding local custom, where there is special treaty between the territorial state and the state legation is concerned. Next, if you see asylum in consular premises, the above principles applies in cases in grant of asylum in the consular premises. Asylum in the premises of international institution. The international law does not recognize any rule regarding the grant of asylum in the premises of international institution. However, temporary asylum may be granted in cases of danger of imminent violation of human rights. Next we will see asylum in warship. There are a conflicting view that to grant asylum in warship is argued that asylum may be granted to political offenders. As far as asylum as to warship is concerned, it may be granted on the ground of humanity. In case of extreme danger of an individual seeking such an asylum, right to grant asylum on warship may be granted in the same way in this case of legation and also subject to the operation of the same condition. Next, if you see asylum in merchant vessel. Since merchant vessels do not enjoy immunity from local jurisdiction, they are not competent to grant asylum to local offenders. If the person after committing a crime on the shore seeks asylum on the board of a foreign merchant ship, he may be asserted by the local police either before the ship is leaving the port or when it comes into another port of the same state. Therefore, the rule that asylum is not granted on the merchant vessel. However, state may grant asylum if they conclude a treaty to this effect. Last, asylum in the premises of international institution. Whether a person taking refuge in the premises of an international institution or organization would be granted asylum is a question which cannot be given with certainty in the absence of any rule to this regard. Because lack of practice, however, a right to grant temporary refuge in an extreme case of danger from the mob cannot be ruled out on the basis of humanitarian ground. Thus, extraterritorial or diplomatic asylum can be granted in exceptional cases and it is necessary to establish legal basis in each of the particular case. Thank you.